really controls the world? You might be thinking of individual plutocrats or politicians. And sure, they may be on top of the world now, but they come and go, and most will be forgotten eventually. If you want to control the past, present, and future, you know what you really need? A dynasty. That's why today we're shining a light on the families who control the world, or at least a humongous portion of its wealth. We're going to tell you who these families are, how they made their fortunes, and what they're doing with them. This is a video you don't want to miss. Now, if you Google world's richest families, you'll find countless clickbait lists, PR puff pieces, and a sprinkling of serious-looking NGO reports. But if you look at their sources, it seems that all roads lead back to lists compiled by Forbes and Bloomberg. Even academic research on, say, wealth inequality, the proliferation of billionaires, and so on, doesn't have any better data to work with than Forbes and Bloomberg's. So, if just two media companies have a duopoly on what we can know about rich families, we'd better find out how they're making these lists, who qualifies, and, perhaps most importantly, who is left off. Unfortunately for us, there seems to be no standardized methodology. Different lists estimate wealth differently, causing a significant variance in the dollar figures reported for the same family across different publications, and causing other families to be omitted entirely. Some lists include royalty and heads of state, and some don't. One list by Bloomberg includes the House of Saud, but limits it to just 3 generations, while at the same time acknowledging that the wealth controlled by the estimated 15,000 living members of the family is likely much higher than the figure quoted. Some lists of individual rich people name-check Bernard Arnault and family, suggesting that the Arnaults are an inseparable unit. And some lists of rich families exclude Bernard Arnault entirely because they don't think his family counts at all, for whatever reason. In other words, it's kind of a mess. Every list seems to have different ideas about which families should or shouldn't be included, and if so, how many of them, how to count their riches, and so on. But a lack of standardization isn't the only tricky variable we have to contend with. That's because rich lists often rely on the cooperation of their subjects. Forbes, for example, is known to send surveys to people it expects should be listed. Now, if a family's wealth comes from shares in a publicly traded company, such as Walmart, then it's relatively straightforward to multiply the share price by the family's holdings and arrive at an estimate. But when it comes to investments made in private, it's a different story. If a family doesn't want to announce to the whole world in Forbes magazine how much money they have, then our understanding of their wealth is an educated guess at best. And, by the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to smash the like button so that more people can see it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your bell notifications so that you never miss another upload.
Hello, it's me, Guy's cousin Barry. I'm very sorry to be interrupting this no doubt fascinating video, but I want to tell you about the Coin Bureau deals page, so listen up and listen well. Alright, this is the place where you will find all the amazing promos and discounts what you, as Coin Bureau viewers, are entitled to. So don't be a mug, go and check it out using the link below. You'll find discounts on hardware wallets, you'll find exchange sign-up bonuses, some of which are absolutely bleeding mental, and you will find trading fee discounts there as well as a whole load of other goodies too. And let me tell you, old Barrington here, he's had to hammer the dog and bone all bleeding day and night to get you these promos and discounts. So you're welcome, thank you very much, go and have a look pronto, or I'll have to come and have a word. Alright?
Now, you can learn a lot about the limits of Forbes's billionaire tracking abilities by listening to one Kerry Dolan. She is the editor at Forbes who's been responsible for collecting the data used in its rich lists since 1994. In an interview with the New York Times, Kerry said that, quote, "The easiest sort of billionaire to handle is one whose wealth derives from his ownership stake in a publicly traded company, probably one he founded, though possibly one he inherited. Anyone who owns more than 5% of a company's shares must disclose that fact, along with the exact number of shares they hold. By contrast, meanwhile, the kind of billionaire whom Kerry would, quote, never find is someone who quietly sold a stake in a business for, say, $250 million in the 90s, then invested it well. Today, a guy like that could use his wealth to do whatever he wanted. Buy truckloads of Nazi memorabilia, try to persuade your mayor to privatize the city's sewers, or maybe both, and you'd be none the wiser. And in fact, he wouldn't even have had to be all that smart with his money. If he parked $250 million in an S&P tracking index fund in 1992 and left it alone, he'd be worth more than $4 billion today. He would have slipped through the billion-dollar barrier like an Olympic diver. But isn't Kerry just describing generational wealth here? Most families that have been rich for more than 1 or 2 generations will have been investing their inherited wealth for decades. And, by the sounds of it, wealth from any investment that isn't in a publicly traded market could be completely invisible to a journalist trying to put together a rich list. If that's the case, then we should probably take dollar estimates of rich families' net worths with a big old grain of salt. Plus, it sounds like there is a whole class of billionaires who we may never know about. And that begs the question, what about the ultra-rich? Is it possible to have a net worth of several $100 billion without anyone knowing about it? Or is that kind of wealth just too big to keep secret? Questions like these recall Donald Rumsfeld's poetic axiom about the limits of human knowledge. Quote,
as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones. Anyway, you get the point. Rich lists are hard. We may never know exactly who all of the richest families or individuals in the world are, or the true extent of their wealth. But we do know enough of them to learn a thing or two about what makes ultra-wealthy families tick. So, without further ado, here are 3 of the richest doxed civilian families on the planet. Who they are, where their money comes from, and what they're doing with it. First up, the Arnaults of Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy or LVMH fame. Bernard Arnault is said to be the richest person in the world, but he appears on some lists of rich individuals as Bernard Arnault and family, so you know he's a family man. Just last year, he appointed his daughter and fellow LVMH board member Delphine to run Christian Dior, the second biggest brand under the LVMH umbrella. Her brother Antoine runs the holding company that controls the family fortune with a controlling stake in LVMH. Arnault has 3 other children who are also in line for his monogrammed throne. Alexandra Arnault is an executive at Tiffany, Frédéric Arnault is the CEO of Tag Heuer, and Jean Arnault is the head of marketing and product development for watches at Louis Vuitton. Interestingly, Bernard Arnault is neither a fashion designer nor a founder and didn't create any of the brands that now make up LVMH. Like his children, Bernard inherited a role at his father's business. In Bernard's case, this was a public construction company called Ferré-Savinel, where he began his career in the early 1970s. Arnault persuaded his dad to pivot towards real estate before switching lanes again to luxury goods with the acquisition of Financière Agache, where he became CEO. Now this turned out to be a fantastic move, as it put Bernard in a position to win a bidding war for the struggling conglomerate Boussac Saint-Frère, which was home to Christian Dior. He bought the group for 1 franc in 1984, laid off 9,000 of its workers, and sold off almost everything except for Dior. For these aggressive tactics, and also probably for the fact that his surname sounds like Arnold, Bernard was nicknamed the Terminator. Terminator of employment contracts, perhaps. Anyway, these tactics worked out brilliantly for him, and within 3 years he was in a position to cook up the 1987 merger between Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy. And so the LVMH behemoth was born. In the intervening years, LVMH has become a luxurious black hole, sucking up aspirational brands in fashion, jewellery, watches, and wine. In 2023, it reached a valuation of $500 billion, making it the largest company by market cap in the Eurozone, and the Arnaults one of the wealthiest families on the planet. Now, there is a certain level of implied villainy inherent to the role of world's richest person. You know, that sort of Jeff Bezos energy. Or, alternatively, if you're Elon Musk, you can turn EV stocks into meme coins and command an army of fans who think you're Tony Stark. Either way, once you hit the centibillionaire mark, you attract a lot of attention, right? Well, despite the fashionable Terminator arc, the Arnault name seems to come with neither notoriety nor any swooning fans. So how exactly have the Arnaults evaded scrutiny for so long? You can trawl through pages and pages of Google search results on Bernard & Co., but there's not much drama to be found. Bernard's Wikipedia page reads like a squeaky clean PR piece that emphasises his philanthropic efforts through LVMH. Now, this is an interesting angle to take, considering that these efforts amounted to 0.4% of LVMH's net profits of $14.1 billion in 2022. The sauciest tidbits that made it past the Wikipedia editors were Arnault's application for Belgian citizenship, which he hurriedly rescinded after being accused of attempting tax evasion. Then there was that time when he hurriedly sold his private jet after someone on Twitter started publicly tracking its flights. Other than that, though, his bio doesn't scream richest person alive. Clearly, this is a dude who is trying not to fumble the family bag. He doesn't want attention, maybe because of France's history of beheading people who bathe in money while ordinary people slave away for a pittance. Anyway, the Arnaults remind us of something about the ultra-rich that the Musks, Zucks and Bezoses of the world make it easy to forget. Generational wealth is distinguished from individual tycoonery by a chronic aversion to fame. When there's a massive funnel running from the world's biggest luxury brands into your bank account, everyone can see when your stock holdings balloon to $200 billion. But if it wasn't for the public-facing nature of the LVMH brands, we suspect few people would even know the Arnault's name. Okay, next up, the Waltons of Walmart fame. Walmart was founded in 1962 by Sam Walton, and under his leadership, the company became the largest company in the world by revenue. Sam Walton died in 1992 and is survived by 3 children, Alice, Rob, and Jim, whose stake in Walmart gives them a collective net worth of around $235 billion. Their late sibling John Walton died in a plane crash in 2005 and is survived by his widow Christy and son Lucas, whose share of the family fortune amounts to just $30 billion. Then there are the paws of the family, Nancy and Anne, who are the daughters of the late Bud Walton, Sam's brother and erstwhile business partner. Life is hard on the periphery of the Walton dynasty, and Nancy and Anne barely have $20 billion between them. Now, despite making more money than he could possibly spend in several lifetimes, Sam Walton was a fierce opponent of philanthropy. He made this clear in a posthumously released autobiography, where he expressed his grave concern that charitable giving would drain value from shareholders. In his own words, quote, "We believe very strongly that Walmart should not be in the charity business." Well, Sam's children seem to know how the billionaire game is played a little better than he did, because they have busied themselves with repackaging the Walton name in a layer of philanthropy. Since Sam's death, the Waltons have funneled billions of dollars into conservative think tanks and infrastructure for school privatization, among other causes, via their Walton Family Foundation. Aside from their collective efforts as a foundation and controlling share of the world's largest private employer, Sam Walton's 3 living children each have the resources to prop up the causes closest to their hearts. So, let's take a quick look at what they're doing with their money. Alice Walton, net worth $76 billion. She is a serial super PAC funder whose presidential campaign contributions include to those of George Bush, Mitt Romney, and Hillary Clinton. Most of her philanthropic ventures seem to be gestures towards the arts and education in her home state of Arkansas, but more recently she's turned her attention to healthcare. At the moment, Alice is busy building the Alice L. Walton School of Medicine, a non-profit school for allopathic medicine, which is a usually derogatory term for the precursor to modern evidence-based medicine. Well, it's her money, I suppose. Next up, there's Rob Walton, net worth $77 billion, co-owner of the Denver Broncos football team alongside former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, among others. Political contributions partially undisclosed, but thought to include a web of political and media organizations in Colorado and Arkansas. Then there's Jim Walton, net worth $82 billion. Backer of national and state-level Republican infrastructure and candidates, including Ron DeSantis. He has been particularly active in Florida, where he appears to be behind the Florida Coalition for Modern Laws, a pressure group lobbying to have the state's trust laws rewritten. The coalition was created by the same New York attorney who set up the Waltons' new family trust in Florida just a year earlier. Its legislative wins include the passing of a new state law that permanently seals all future court proceedings involving a private family trust company. Another win, meanwhile, was the crippling of the state's rule against perpetuities, which was changed so that a single trust can now continue for 1,000 years. Originally, trusts were limited to just 90 years, and this was later quadrupled to 360 years. But, apparently, 360 years is too short a time horizon for the Walton dynasty, so 1,000 it is. Well, you don't make big money by thinking small, I suppose. Our third and final family is a shy Swedish dynasty who have the distinction of being the oldest money on our list. Meet the Wallenbergs, collective net worth $420 billion by some estimates. The tale of their riches began in 1858 when André Oscar Wallenberg founded Stockholms Enskilda Bank, which would later become SEB or Skandinaviska Enskilda Banken, currently Sweden's largest bank by market cap and total assets. In the intervening years, Wallenbergs would become powerful industrialists, politicians, diplomats, and bureaucrats, and the family now controls the 4 largest companies on the Swedish stock exchange. Their own investment company, Investor, tech company ABB, pharma and biotech giant AstraZeneca, and Atlas Copco, the industrial tools manufacturer. But you know, when the wealth and power of a European family stretches uninterrupted through the entire 20th century, there's one question begging to be asked. What exactly were they doing between the years 1939 and 1945? Well, the first answer you're likely to hear will be about Raoul Wallenberg, who is the most famous Wallenberg to date, and for good reason. Raoul was a diplomat working in Budapest during World War II, who is celebrated for his efforts to rescue Jews from the Holocaust. But you know, family business can be messy. At the same time Raoul was housing and issuing protective passports to thousands of Jews, his family's bank allegedly took ownership of foreign subsidiaries of IG Farben and other Nazi industrial concerns to prevent them from being seized by the Allies. Now, if you're not familiar, IG Farben was a notorious Nazi chemical cartel that experimented upon and worked tens of thousands of slaves in concentration camps to the brink of death, and produced Zyklon B, the poison gas that killed them when they could work no more. The Stockholms Enskilda Bank has also been accused of buying up shares and bonds that it knew full well had been stolen from Jewish investors. Then there was the allegation that the bank funded Nazi Germany's nuclear weapons research. Anyway, nobody appeared to notice, and Stockholm's Enskilda Bank came out of the war squeaky clean, clearing the way for subsequent generations of Wallenbergs to become one of the world's richest families. The combined value of the companies in the Wallenberg sphere, as their business empire is known, amounts to more than $450 billion. Interestingly, the net worth of the current 5th-generation leaders of the Wallenberg sphere, Jakob, Marcus and Peter Jr., is said to be just 8 figures each. This is a result of the Wallenbergs' circuitous business model that they call the circuit. The Wallenbergs control a web of 16 non-profit foundations, which collectively own controlling shares in more than 30 massive companies via Investor, the family's aptly named investment company that is the real jewel in their crown. The profits from these investments are reinvested into the foundations, and so it is that the nominal net wealth of individual members of the Wallenberg family is kept nominally minuscule compared to the amount of value they actually control. As far as we're concerned, this strategy is not enough to exclude the $450 billion Wallenberg sphere from our list of richest families. The Wallenbergs may keep a low profile as individuals, but their power and influence is just too sprawling to hide. We can point to, for example, the Wallenbergs' close relationships with Sweden's royal family, with Sweden's largest political party, the Social Democrats, and their proximity to discussions regarding Sweden's joining of NATO. Wallenberg-controlled companies, most notably Swedish weapons manufacturer Saab, stand to gain a lot from Sweden joining NATO, so we imagine the champagne was flowing when full membership was granted earlier this year. It is hard to imagine the Wallenbergs being on the breadline any time between now and the very crack of doom. So, 3 families who control almost $1 trillion between them. They amassed their riches in different ways and seem to live quite differently too. But what unites them is a structured approach to not fumbling the generational bag. They entrench their next of kin in the family business empire, avoid the spotlight like kryptonite, and spray a, albeit thin, layer of philanthropy over their family name to mask the smell of villainy that comes from hoarding hundreds of billions of dollars. Statistically, none of us are ever likely to attain anything even close to these levels of wealth, but we can still learn a lesson here, folks. If you do become fortunate enough to come into a large amount of money someday, you should probably keep a low profile and resist the proximity to fame that so often comes with riches. Try to keep your name out of the media, and if Forbes sends you a survey in the post, burn it. If you do have a public profile, though, hire a good PR agency to make sure the first 10 pages of Google search results for your name are as boring as possible. Set up a non-profit organisation and have it donate a minuscule sliver of your wealth to one social cause or another, and then make sure everyone knows about the great work your foundation is doing. If you can, rub shoulders with politicians and give generously to their campaigns, get them hooked on your donation money, and then make it known what kind of policies you would like to see enacted. And finally, consider putting your wealth in assets that hold their value over time and that your family will be able to access if anything ever happens to you. These could include BTC, they could include gold, or they could even include a good old-fashioned trust fund. Because, remember, however rich you are, you can't take it with you. And if you're serious about starting a family dynasty, then you better make sure there's plenty left over for your children when you finally depart to the great hereafter. And that's all for today, folks. So if you learned something new in this video, make sure the like button is in smithereens. If you think we missed an important family, let us know about them in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have your bell notifications on so you don't miss the next upload. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.